It is time now for today's Talkback segment. Each day we post a question on Court TV's social media pages. We gather your comments and questions and respond right here on the show. Today there was a placement hearing in Michigan for alleged school shooter Ethan Crumley. The question in front of the judge: should the teen be moved to a juvenile facility while he awaits trial? So we asked you, where do you think Ethan Crumley would be better served? In a juvenile facility or adult detention? Still with me, former trial and appellate attorney, Dr. Tracy Pearson. All right, Tracy, let's go to our first comment. It comes from Killian Salter. He says solitary confinement is inhumane treatment, and jails are restricted from housing juveniles with adults. Move him. That was the point I was making earlier. That makes this a little bit more difficult. It's hard to curry any kind of favor for this kid based on what he did, obviously. But when you think about this 15-year-old in solitary confinement, no contact.
Situations where children are in juvenile detention centers, they aren't like Disney World. They have cells. They're in those cells. Those cells are locked, especially in more restrictive environments within those institutions. So it isn't as if he is going to be walking around freely at a juvenile center. He's going to be in similar circumstances to some degree.
Yeah, and that was what one of the testimony of that manager was. She said we would have a safety plan in place, obviously. Our next comment comes from Lynn Sessler. She says he definitely doesn't need to be around any more children after he killed 4 of them. And that, to me, is the #1 reason why you keep him out of that youth facility. The judge mentioned it in his previous hearing. He has to have one of these hearings every 30 days, by the way, according to the juvenile justice law in Michigan. The last time the judge said, you know, the fact that the kids are basically around the same age of the kids he killed, yeah, it's a pretty good reason.
It's going to be very disruptive to that institution and to those children. You know, children who are in juvenile detention centers, while I can't say all of them, many of them are there that have past traumas. And having him there could very much trigger them and create more emotional disruption for these kids than they already have.
Yeah, and I did some work earlier on in my career in the juvenile justice system, and a lot of them have some slight mental issues, things that very easily they get triggered. That's part of the reason they're in the situation that they're in. So it can be quite a powder keg under those circumstances. All right, our next comment comes from Takashi Thompson. She says a cement cell with a glass door is better than the coffin that he put his victims in. And I think at the end of the day, Doctor, that sums it up pretty well. Again, as I said, hard to curry any favor for this kid at this point.
Yes, and you know, he's alive. That isn't always the case with people who have alleged to have committed these types of crimes. Oftentimes they are taken down and are neutralized, is the term law enforcement uses. So he's alive, and he should be grateful for that.
Yes, exactly, and I could not agree with you more. All right, Dr. Pearson, thank you so much for being with me tonight. Truly a pleasure having you on the show. We got to have you back again soon.
Thank you very much, Michael.
All right, I'm Michael Ayala. It's been a pleasure being with you as well. Coming up next in Closing Arguments, Vinnie Politan takes a look at today's guilty verdict in the federal trial of the 3 men who killed Ahmaud Arbery. You don't want to miss it, and there's a lot more legal stories for you as well. Keep it right here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Stay tuned.
Yep, we get it, Tim.
Did you get it, Deb?
Yes. In basically 30 seconds, you can get approved and see your real down payment.
And your real monthly payment?
And your monthly payment. Get your real deal at drive10.com.
In Brunswick, Georgia, justice tonight for the family of Ahmaud Arbery. All three men convicted of murdering Ahmaud, now convicted of federal hate crimes. We have reaction.
Ahmaud will continue to rest in peace, but he will now begin to rest in power.
In Pasco County, Florida, day 7 of the popcorn movie murder trial, Curtis Reeves claims self-defense, but has been charged with murdering Chad Olson in a movie theater during previews. One of the big questions for this jury, did Chad Olson throw his cell phone at Curtis Reeves before being shot?
Is the injury combined with the stippling consistent with that hand being in a fist when it was injured?
Yes.
On the docket tonight in Oakland County, Michigan, the 15-year-old accused Oxford school shooter back in court trying to get out of jail and transferred to a juvenile facility.
The defendant isn't who he appears to be. He allows people to see who he wants them to see.
Plus, in Union County, Georgia, a single mom leaves her 4-year-old home with her 14-year-old, and the 4-year-old wanders outside into the roadway. It's the second time this has happened within 12 months, and now the mom has been charged. Tonight's 13th juror question: when should leaving your 14-year-old child home babysitting a younger sibling be a crime? Buckle your seatbelts. This hour of closing arguments starts right now.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thanks so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. It was about 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago, walking through my neighborhood, and a neighbor came up to me, and he knows what I do for a living, and we're friendly. And he said, "Did you hear what happened?" I said, What? He said, "Did you hear the story about the kid that was jogging through a neighborhood down in South Georgia and was being chased and hunted down and got shot and killed?" I said, "Yeah, we heard a little bit about it, but we're still trying to get some more of these details." He's like, I can't believe it. He said, "These guys, they were just chasing him because he's jogging through the neighborhood. What is going on? What is going on here?" And of course, he was talking about Ahmaud Arbery. Let me show you his picture. This is Ahmaud Arbery, okay? He was running through a neighborhood. He had run through the neighborhood before. You're allowed to do that. He was wearing running shoes, shorts, t-shirt, kind of like in the middle of the day, okay? Now, this whole story went to the next level when the video was released. And that's when we got this image I want to show you. And this is the image that caught a nerve with everyone. Can we just drop those, let's just drop those words underneath there just for a second. I want everyone to see this image. This is who is chasing this young man through the neighborhood in a pickup truck, standing on the back of the pickup truck with a gun, driving the pickup truck, getting out with a shotgun, and you're chasing someone down in the middle of the day. What year is this? What country is this? That's the outrage. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, this case was more than a murder. A murder is like as bad as it gets, right? But this was something more, something different. That's why today is important. Today was the federal trial. What happened today will not impact these defendants one iota. They're done, their life. They're gonna die in prison from the murder conviction in state court. But they are in federal court today because this is really what I call the stamp on top of this that gets to the heart of what this murder was about. Like, why
are you in that pickup truck? Why are you chasing Ahmaud Arbery through the neighborhood? And the jury gave a resounding answer, because it was a hate crime. And that verdict delivered today. Haley Bull, great correspondent for our sister network Newsy, has the latest for us tonight from Brunswick, Georgia.
And they gave us a sense of a small victory. But we as a family will never get victory because Ahmaud is gone forever.
Come on. Ahmaud was a kid you can't place. All right. Because the heart he had, that will be missed by him.
I'm so sorry. So sorry. Technical difficulty. You're not hearing all the sound from Haley's report tonight. But let me tell you what happened. Guilty, guilty, guilty. All three men who decided in the middle of the day, instead of, doing some chores, maybe fixing something around the house, maybe grabbing lunch, decide to grab their guns, decide to jump in the pickup truck and chase someone around and chase him and chase. Remember, it's not like a quick chase. They're chasing him one direction. He switches directions. They turn around. Then their neighbor joins. He has no idea what's happening except, oh, let's see. We've got two guys in a pickup truck chasing a young black man through the neighborhood. I guess I better help him. Has no idea what's going on. How about taking a moment? Like, why are they chasing him? Why should I join in this chase? Again, the jury answered that question today. All three guilty of a hate crime. Let's bring in our think tank tonight. I want to hear from them. Joining us tonight in Atlanta, Georgia, criminal defense attorney, former federal prosecutor, law professor at Texas Southern University, Michael Sterling. In Seattle, Washington, trial attorney Ann Bremner, and in West Palm Beach, Florida, former police lieutenant and trial attorney Rick King. Welcome to everyone tonight. I know all of you have been following this story with us through everything, and now we finally get, I believe, to the end of all of this, right? The end. Two trials, two verdicts. We know it's a hate crime. We know it's murder. We know they're locked up for the rest of their lives. Michael Sterling, this is the question, though, because it was more than a trial. It wasn't that simple to go from someone is chased and shot in a neighborhood to where we are today. It was a long road. Does this tell us that our system is working tonight, or does this tell us that our system still needs to be fixed tonight?
I think, Vinnie, it tells us that our system still has work to do. I mean, candidly, this case was never going to be prosecuted in the first place if it had been left up to the elected district attorney and officials down in Brunswick. It was not going to happen. They had made a determination that these individuals had acted appropriately. They were going to let them slide. And candidly, it wasn't until there was public pressure put on by individuals who stand up for civil rights, which is the way things happen in this country, right? People have to stand up. They have to make their voices heard. The public participation in our justice system is critical, which is one of the reasons why Court TV covers cases, right? The public participation, the transparency in our system is what, they say sunlight best disinfectant. And so if it had not been for the public participation, bringing this video to the forefront, demanding justice, marching, we wouldn't have gotten to this point. And so while I am happy with the results, and maybe happy is the wrong word, while I am, because Ahmaud Arbery should really still be here, but while I am pleased with the work of the federal prosecutors and the state prosecutors who ultimately took over this case to seek justice for Mr. Arbery, I do think that it demonstrates that our system is full of flawed individuals. We still have a long way to go, but I think that what we saw today was a jury saying Black Lives Matter, even if the defendants didn't think so, because they, from the evidence, demonstrated that they did not value Black lives.
And Bremner, your thoughts tonight about what this day means, and as we come to the, hopefully, the end of all of this, because there's always appeals, but like, good luck with that. As we get to the end of all this, what do you think the significance is?
Well, I think, and I agree with Michael as always in his comments, but I think the significance is that this is a case that was so outrageous that it uniformly was outrageous to everybody, and from the beginning to the end, and that includes the state case and the federal case. I mean, that whole house of cards that the defendants built by saying that Arbery had somehow committed a crime and they were making a citizen's arrest, remember that, in their defense, and then basically saying they acted in self-defense because they were in a place they had a right to be and they were justified in deadly force. I mean, that compounded, the difficulty in terms of what they had in their defense. Nobody believed him. Jury didn't believe him. This jury didn't believe him. Everybody, as I said, uniformly has looked at this case with uniform outrage, just like you evidenced in your opening remarks about this, Vinnie. Everybody's outraged. Enough is enough. And they got their just desserts the first time and then again now.
Rick King, I wanted to ask you the same thing, but I wanted to add one other part to this because you were part of law enforcement. One of these defendants, Greg McMichael, the one who got everything in motion, was retired law enforcement. And to me, that's even more troubling that a former member of law enforcement who's been trained didn't take a moment to think, what in the world am I doing here? Why am I standing on the back of a pickup truck chasing someone around the neighborhood with my gun? I can't believe there wasn't a moment of reflection there that a former member of law enforcement would have. But that aside, Rick, your thoughts tonight.
Vinnie, that the image of Mr. McMichael standing on the back of the truck, literally hunting down a man for reasons with which he had no foundation to even be in that place. Yes, I agree with Michael. The system is still, it still needs work, and I think that and that applies also to law enforcement. It applies to almost every facet of our nation this day. Our nation, we need help and we need work as a nation. We're still healing, and we understand that, racism is still among us. And, as a society, we need to each be doing our part to come rise above and, start calling out these things. And while, as you said earlier, Vinnie, this particular court hearing and this particular verdict really does nothing to the overall picture. These guys are going to die in jail. However, this gives some closure to that family, and it closes out a chapter of hate that we all watched firsthand.
Great perspective from everyone. Thank you so much. You're going to be with us the whole hour. Michael Sterling, Ann Bremner, Rick King. Right now, though, want to turn to another case that we are following. This is another federal case, so there's no cameras inside the courtroom. I'm talking about the trial of the other 3 officers implicated in the death of George Floyd. That trial taking place out in St. Paul, Minnesota. Things are wrapping up there. I expect we may very well have a verdict in that case this week as well. Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter is joining us live from St. Paul, Minnesota with the latest tonight. Chanley, let me ask you first of all, we had closing arguments today. What can you tell us about those closing arguments? A little different, right? Because you've got 3 defendants, so you're going to have 3 closing arguments for the defense.
That's right, Vinnie. It was a full day of closing arguments for these jurors. The prosecution passionately outlined their case, taking up about 2 hours of time with the first close and, of course, the rebuttal close, and really separated each of these defendants, pointing out their inaction and what they did during the incident with George Floyd, returning to themes of in your custody means in your care, and that they chose to do nothing as George Floyd pleaded for air. And it was the power powerful rebuttal close. And here are some of the final words this jury was left with before they went home this evening, Vinnie. They were told by the prosecution that there are no free passes on the Constitution because the risk is too great. There is no pass for, I'm a brand new officer. There is no pass for, I was afraid of getting in trouble. There is no pass for, I thought I was losing my job. You must act. They go on to say, you must take reasonable steps to stop the force. You must take reasonable steps to provide medical care. That is willfulness. Knowing that what you did was wrong is to be in violation of the law. Evil happens when good men do nothing. This happened in part because these three defendants did nothing. Vinnie.
How about the defendants today?
The defense attorneys really hit on similar themes through all three of the closing arguments, and really the rookie officers, former officer Lane and Tao, their attorneys focused on these themes: their inadequate training with the police department, their lack of experience, being only a couple of days on the job, and that they perceived that they were subordinate to the most senior officer, Derek Chauvin, who really call all the shots in that incident, is what they argued. And then all three, including former Officer Tu Tao, pointed to this confrontational crowd that was becoming more and more volatile during the incident. And they all three focused on not having that willful intent that these charges require under the law. That was no bad purpose or improper motive to disobey or disregard the law. And to all three defendants, that was just not the case, Vinnie.
All right, so closing arguments today. What's the schedule tomorrow out there in St. Paul?
We should be in a verdict watch. That is after the judge instructs these jurors on the law. And again, this jury, we lost another juror earlier today without explanation, but right now we have 12 jurors, 2 alternates, and of those 12, we have 4 men and 8 women. All appear to be white. They will be determining the fate of these 3 officers. If convicted, they could be sentenced really anywhere from 10 years up to life, even though that's a little bit extreme for this. But of course, we will be here to bring you any word from this jury tomorrow, Vinnie.
Chanley Painter in St. Paul, Minnesota. Big day tomorrow. Big week out there. Thank you so much, Chanley. Appreciate it. When we come back, we're going to take you down to Pasco County, Florida. The latest in the trial that you're watching here on Court TV, Curtis Reeves. Here's the question. Right before he shot and killed Chad Olson, did Chad Olson throw his cell phone at Curtis Reeves? That issue front and center today. We'll break it down when we come back.
Retired police captain.
that you saw this tall gentleman with either a cup or a mug or a thermos in his hand, dark in color, making a throwing motion towards that back row with his left hand.
This is a leading question.
No, it's not. Overruled.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, I did. I agree.
You agree? Okay. Now, would you agree or disagree that after you saw that throwing motion, your eyes went back to the previews, to watch the previews? You agree or disagree?
Agree.
Big point for the defense. Big point. This is the trial of Curtis Reeves. We know he shot and killed Chad Olson in that movie theater, but the question is what happened before he shot Chad Olson. We know at some point Chad Olson, just before he gets shot, grabs the popcorn and throws it at him, but the defense is alleging that before that moment, something else happens. Here's some surveillance video. You got to look for a little white flash. The question is, that little white flash, what is that? Is that Chad Olson throwing a cell phone at Curtis Reeves? Is that little flash there the cell phone? Or is it the reflection of Curtis Reeves' shoes? That's what the prosecution is saying. It's the shoes. Is it the shoes? Is it the cell phone? What exactly are we seeing in the video? And what did that witness, Joanna Turner, see? This is not the popcorn. We're talking about this. It's happening before the popcorn, that little white dot. Let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Julie Janae, joining us live from Pasco County, Florida tonight. Wow, the video's always grainy. I know it always is in these trials, but tell us about that little white dot.
Vinny, the jury doesn't know that the state is going to tell them that this was the shoes. They waited. It's likely going to come out in their rebuttal case, but we know that we heard from the video expert for the defense who testified that he can't say one way or the other, and probably suggesting that the state can't say one way or the other, that it is definitively the cell phone of Chad Olson or definitively the shoes of Curtis Reeves. But here's a look at the video or the images that we expect the state is going to show during their rebuttal, because we've seen it in previous filings. But they are going to point out that that dot is present when Curtis Reeves walks into the theater, and it's present when you see him actually in the cinema and then when he sits down. So they'll be showing these different reflective areas that they believe are the shoes to try and shut down what the defense has said about this possibly being the illuminated cell phone. But the defense isn't going to back off of this theory, even if there's a testimony or if the jury doesn't believe that that particular white dot was the cell phone, because they still say it's possible that a cell phone was thrown during this altercation. Take a listen to some of the arguments about the witness they're going to bring tomorrow, a defense expert to reconstruct this scene.
But I do want to talk about this issue of the illuminating or reflective. You know, we presented to Mr. Knox the fact that there was an issue here as to whether that illuminating or reflective light was either a phone or a shoe. Could be either. I'm the first one to tell you that, you know, it could be either. Part of the problem that we have in trying to determine whether it was one or the other, you know, is because everything was dismantled over there in the form of the actual machinery. Had they not, we feel very comfortable that we would have been able to tell this court what it was. The problem is that I don't want to hide that fact that we were trying to determine whether that reflective or illuminating light was either a shoe or a phone, because that's the truth. And Mr. Knox, in his crime scene investigation, you know, had to consider those two items as whether they were or they were not. So I'm not gonna get up to this jury and say, well, we had a source that we were concerned about, which was either reflective or illuminating, and not tell them what those two sources were that, you know, we were concerned about. Those were the only two sources that we were concerned about, and so that's the truth. And so I'm not going to tell this court that I'm going to get up there and say, you know, I've been very good, I think, at making sure with Mr. Koenig that, you know, I was going to be identifying reflective, illuminating. Because although Koenig was there to make sure that everything was going to be done videography-wise, it was really Knox and Lacey, which was Mr. Koenig's partner, that were instrumental in setting everything up for that very late night that we were 2 o'clock in the morning at the Cobb Theater.
That expert that they're talking about, Michael Knox, he's going to reconstruct this scene for the jury. He's going to show how he got in between those theater seats and took a picture of what perhaps Chad Olson would have looked like if he was standing over the defendant and was being backlit by that movie screen. But he can't suggest to this jury that this is what Curtis Reeves saw, but just to give the effect or the understanding of the effect of backlighting.
All right, Julie, a medical expert also testifying today and talking about cell phones.
Right, the medical examiner, he was a forensic pathologist, but not the person who did the autopsy on Chad Olson. He testified that Chad Olson's hand might have been in a fist when he was shot. He didn't say why that mattered to the case. He also suggested that the injury of someone who has been hit in the head with a cell phone, that could cause trauma. Take a listen.
And so, for instance, if something that's a cell phone, if it were to strike somebody in the temple on the edge, is that potentially the cause of a fracture through that area?
Yes, it could be, yes.
Really demonstrative there with the skeleton in front of this jury, but likely in closing arguments, we'll hear the defense say that this could show what condition Curtis Reeves was in if he was in fact hit by that cell phone, Vinny.
All right, another big day, and what an interesting issue, the shoes versus the cell phone here. Julie Janae down in Pasco County, Florida. Thanks so much. Let's bring back in the think tank Michael Sterling and Bremner. Rick King still with us. All right. This is going to be like multiple choice here, but you only have 2 choices. I'm going to show you a couple pictures. First, I'm going to show you pictures of Curtis Reeves' shoes, a little closer up, okay? Let's take a look at those shoes. Kind of like the ones that Michael Sterling wears on the weekends when he plays hoops. Okay? They're saying they got the little reflective things on the side there. I don't know if we have the picture with the light shining on them, but there you see the little reflective swooshes there. Now let me show you the aisle where Curtis Reeves was sitting. I've got a picture of that. Popcorn. Do you see the cell phone? There's a cell phone on the ground right there. Cell phone on the ground and popcorn. So let's go. Ann Bremner, ladies first. What do you think happened there? Was it a cell phone, that reflection, or is that reflection Curtis Reeves' shoes?
I'm going to pick the shoes. I mean, I don't know if that's right or not. Do I get like a ding, ding, ding for the right answer? I mean, it looks like that to me. And I don't know that we really heard consistent stories before about the cell phone.
It looks like the shoes to you.
Certainly. Yeah. Yes.
Rick King, shoes or cell phone? What does it look like? I know you're looking.
If I had to guess, I think it's almost, to me, it might be too bright to be the shoes. So I'm thinking it might be the phone. I don't know. Can't tell you.
Michael Sterling, shoes or a cell phone?
You know, I don't ever get to play juror because I never get picked for juries. But I would say probably agree with Anna. It does look like the shoes, and it looked to me, Vinny, like if I'm looking very closely, like the cell phone had this black covering on it that would have made it maybe not be as reflective, almost like a case around it that was darkened that would have made it not reflect. See, right there, it has like this black case around it that would have made it not reflective, and if the screen isn't on, it wouldn't be reflective at all. Whereas the shoes are, always going to be reflective, and it's consistent with the 3 other images they show of him walking in. So this is probably why I don't get picked for jurors, because I would be explaining this to other jurors. But yeah, it looks like the shoes to me.
Here's the only problem I have with the shoes, based upon the other photos that we expected that Julie Janae showed us. Those dots were so tiny, and that's like a close-up picture. And that's a zoomed in picture of Curtis Reeves. You go to that movie theater and we're like way back, but that dot is even bigger than that in a further away shot. That's why I'm trying to put 2 and 2 together here. It's not making sense to me either way. Here's the question. If this jury is split about this issue, is this a winning issue for the defense? Is it enough? Is it enough to get them to justifiable homicide? Anyone?
No.
I don't think you lose the ball that far, man. No.
Okay. So despite the fact, and this is important, despite the fact the defense is making a big deal about this in their case, you think even if they convince the jury that a cell phone was thrown at Curtis Reeves, that still does not get him to self-defense?
I think in order to get him to self-defense, you need that. And I'll acquiesce to Michael and Ann, but I think he's got to testify. I think he's got to talk about what it is. Yeah. Other than that, that by itself isn't going to do it. But he's got to be there and he's got to articulate what it was.
All right. Great analysis. Michael, are those the shoes that you do wear on the weekends when you're No?
No, I don't.
You wear the high top version.
Look familiar. I got to wear the high tops. I got to protect my ankles.
Exactly. All right. Michael and Rick staying with us. Still ahead.
On the docket tonight in Oakland County, Michigan, the 15-year-old accused Oxford school shooter back in court trying to get out of jail and transferred to a juvenile facility.
The defendant isn't who he appears to be. He allows people to see who he wants them to see.
Plus, in Union County, Georgia, a single mom leaves her 4-year-old home with her 14-year-old, and the 4-year-old wanders outside into the roadway. It's the second time this has happened within 12 months, and now the mom has been charged. Tonight's 13th juror question: when should leaving your 14-year-old child home babysitting a younger sibling be a crime?
Attention, parents.
On the docket tonight, the Oxford school shooter, 15 years old. Right now, he's being held in jail, back in court, trying to get transferred from jail to juvenile. Take a look at what happened.
In an unfathomable way, he attempts to justify his future actions. To place this defendant with other at-risk juveniles who are presumably the same age as his victims would be contrary to the rehabilitation of those at Children's Village and pose a potential risk of harm to their safety. Another factor that the court must consider is the prior delinquent acts of this juvenile. As stated in the People's Brief, despite having no documented juvenile history, the defendant's antisocial behavior is very concerning. The evidence will show that he bragged about wearing a mask to the public. He enjoyed his dark side. The defendant isn't who he appears to be. He allows people to see who he wants them to see, and only those close to him, such as his parents, would understand or recognize it. He is fascinated with violence, weapons, and seeing others suffer. He cunningly placed a bird in the boys' bathroom at Oxford High School, and in his journal, he later reveled about how happy he was for not getting caught. His behavior, however, continued to escalate. And when the defendant committed those premeditated murders on November 30th, he did so with the intent to be remembered, to terrorize the community, and to gain recognition.
I believe that the evidence will show that in the time leading up to these events that my client was hallucinating, that he was seeing things, he was hearing voices, he was not sleeping, he was extremely anxious, he was not eating properly, and that he had asked his parents to see a therapist. And at the time of this event, my client was not in any sort of therapy. Hearing, Your Honor, we will be asking that he be moved to Children's Village. I do think that is an appropriate place for him. There are other juveniles charged with murder that are housed in that facility. This would not be the first time. And we feel that due to his age being 15, and although he is educated and a very bright young man, I still think the appropriate placement for him is at Children's Village.
You're familiar with the defendant at issue in this case, correct?
Correct.
At least somewhat familiar. You know who we're here about and what he's accused of doing, correct?
Yes.
In a situation like that, would he be housed in a different area? Would he be secluded from his peers and other individuals who may be younger than him or older?
I believe he would be in the same group with his peers.
You're familiar, are you not, with why we're here today and the request that's being made?
Yes.
Have you contemplated any concerns that you have on behalf of Children's Village were that change to be made?
Yes.
And what are those concerns?
I think first and foremost, safety and security for everyone. I think resources in terms of staffing and mental health. We don't know what we don't know in terms of this particular case, and we've never had a situation like this involving a school shooting or a defendant who was going to, use the insanity plea. So we don't know what we're going to need. I have concerns about the trauma impact on other young people.
Okay. He's claiming legal insanity at the time, so the defense is not saying he didn't do it, right? So to me, just putting a school shooter in a place called the Children's Village just sounds wrong. But let's bring in our think tank, see what they have to say about it. Rick King, where should he be, 15 years old, before his case is disposed of?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe the rules in Michigan say that he must be in this case, the Children's Village. Now, the judge may place him in the county jail if his habits I think it's his habits and his customs or something like that are menacing to the other children, and they can't safely or adequately house him there. And so that's the considerations for the judge. And I think they made a great case for his insanity defense today. I think they really covered his mental health issues very, very well. But at the end of the day, I also think about, what the attorney for Mr. Crumbley argued, and that and a person with mental health issues being held in isolation 24 hours a day, just in there with the thoughts in your head, can't be healthy. And so I think unless they can overcome those rules of procedure, that he has to go to the Children's Village.
And Bremner, Children's Village for the school shooter?
Definitely not. I think the same reasons that he's being tried as an adult, which is the seriousness of these crimes and the fact that we're looking at public safety at the age of 15. I mean, 18, of course, is the line of demarcation. Same reasons dictate that he should be in an adult jail. And the fact is, these juvenile facilities, kids climb over the fence and escape. I mean, this is a juvie jail. I mean, you don't have the security to keep him in, let alone to keep him from harming other kids. And he's a school shooter. And so the fact is, he shot kids the same age. Those are the kids he's going to be incarcerated with. And that shouldn't be the case. And finally, Vinnie, what really struck me in this case is something he said, which was, I want to make sure I got caught after the shooting so I could see how much everyone suffered. I mean, think about that in terms of where we put him.
Michael?
Yeah, Vin, I think I'm with Rick on this one, which is, I know, very rare moment for court TV. But, I think the way the Michigan law is set up, and I have very strong feelings, Vinny, about trial detention while the presumption of innocence is still applicable, even in a case where you're claiming legal insanity. But he's 15 years old. I go to visit clients in jail all the time, some of whom later are acquitted of all charges. And pretrial detention in an adult facility is extraordinarily rough. No matter what the facility is, it's very, very rough. So for a 15-year-old to be in an adult facility pre-trial while they're still trying to adjudicate his case, I think, could do extreme harm. But I think that if the facility itself cannot adequately, safely care for him and the others, then obviously the judge has some very serious considerations. But based on Michigan's law and what's required, I think the defense made a very strong case for why this 15-year-old, while he, despite what he's accused of and, what admittedly he did and clear, he still has a presumption of innocence under the law. I think that they have an obligation probably to put him, in a juvenile facility pre-trial until his case has been adjudicated.
Judge has not made the decision yet. We'll let you know what that decision is. In the meantime, we've got one more story to get to. When we come back, we're going to hear from you, our 13th juror. Another story out of Georgia tonight. A single mom has a 4-year-old, has a 14-year-old. Her 14-year-old is watching her 4-year-old. The 4-year-old wanders out of the home. Police respond. Mom gets charged. Your thoughts on that when we come back. story is a bit of a head scratcher out of Georgia. Single mom has been indicted for allowing her 14-year-old to babysit her 4-year-old. Okay, now there's a little more to the story. I'm going to read to you straight from the indictment, okay, of this mom. Let's see. Charges the defendant, Melissa Shields Henderson, with the offense of reckless conduct for that said accused in Union County, Georgia on the 5th day of May 2020. That's the middle of COVID, or the beginning of COVID, right? So the kids are home, the daycare is shut down, the schools are remote, but mom's still going to work. Did unlawfully endanger the bodily safety of her 4-year-old by consciously disregarding a substantial and unjustifiable risk that her act of leaving the 4-year-old home alone, supervised by a 14-year-old sibling, would endanger the safety of said person, and the disregard constituted a gross deviation from the standard of care which a reasonable person would exercise in this situation. To wit, the accused did have knowledge that within the prior 12 months after leaving the 4-year-old alone in the care of the same aforementioned sibling, the 4-year-old did exit the home and entered and was near a public roadway with no supervision. Okay, so basically the 4-year-old snuck out once when the 14-year-old was watching, and then the 14-year-old was watching the 4-year-old again, and the 4-year-old got out. So she's been indicted for reckless conduct. Posted it on social media. When should someone be charged with a crime? When you're leaving your young child home with your 14-year-old? 13th juror comment of the day coming from Shannon tonight. No, it's ridiculous to charge her. I was babysitting my younger cousin starting at the age of 11. And as far as the 4-year-old getting out of the house, well, they can sometimes get out even with an adult present because 4-year-olds are sneaky like that. Michael Sterling, Ann Bremner, Rick King, let's bring them back in, our think tank tonight. Michael, you're in Georgia and you've got some sneaky kids at home. What are your thoughts?
I do. This one's tough. I've always been, even with the school shooting case, I was reluctant to say we got to charge the parents because I believe that there are due process rights involved. And, this one's just tricky because it had happened within the previous 12 months where she did the exact same thing and the exact same thing happened. Now, if it's a babysitter, right, and my 3-year-old, my 2-year-old, my 8-year-old gets out of the house, I'm probably never letting that babysitter come back. But it's different when it's, your own other child, right? Because you probably had a talk with them, probably corrected the behavior, probably tried to figure something out, say, hey, don't let that happen again. So I think that, charges are probably not appropriate here. I think, something short of that, hopefully she's not going to do any jail time, but something short of charges, some official and an official indictment. I think this is a little over the top.
Put her in jail. Who's going to watch the kids, Ann?
That's right, exactly. I love that 4-year-olds are sneaky like that. I mean, yeah, who's going to watch the kids? I mean, this is ridiculous. And I look at this, I'm like, I think I was babysitting at 13, 14. I don't know if I would leave kids with me today or back then, but I was, right? So, just saying.
Rick King, it seemed that they were upset because it had happened previously, kind of same situation. I think the neighbor maybe found the child, both times called police. Your thoughts about going after and indicting this single mom? And let's not forget when this is happening again. This is happening May of 2020. It's COVID. The world is shut down. There's no place to put the kids. What are we supposed to do?
So we're going to shock TV again, and I'm going to agree with Michael. I think it might be a bridge too far. I think until you read me the indictment, I was told, because I didn't know that. So I was like, absolutely not. And then I see it happened 12 months ago. But like here, I think what you would see is DCF get involved in this case, and they would have services, and there's babysitting training, and there's things that you can do to try to rectify what happened before. I think that's a more appropriate response in this case, rather than, trying to hold this mom accountable when she's trying to go to work during COVID, likely couldn't get services.
Let me throw something out here. And Michael Sterling, you only have like 15 seconds to respond, though. Okay. What if she did take her child to daycare and the child got out of that daycare and then she brought her back to that same daycare? Would we still be charging mom?
No, we wouldn't. No, we would not. The daycare would be under investigation, but the mom would not.
Okay, so all right, that's the problem I have with these charges. Anyway, mom's in a tough spot. All single moms are in a tough spot. Single dads are in a tough spot, especially in the midst of the COVID shutdown. But we'll see how that all develops. Maybe there's a little more to the story that will come out. Michael Sterling and Bremner, Rick King, always great to have you on the show. On this Tuesday, 2/22/22, we made history. Thank you so much. When we come back, folks, we've got a huge development in one of the cases we've been tracking. That's next.
Do you use Viagra?
In Moab, Utah, new information released from a search warrant connected to the murders of newlyweds Crystal Turner and Kylan Schulte. We get the latest from private investigator Jason Jensen, who is working the case.
What is very uncomforting is that
There 100% is a murderer on the loose.
In tonight's Unsolved Case File in Missoula, Montana, the disappearance of Jermaine Charlo. It's been more than 3 years since she was last seen at a local bar. Tonight, we ask for your help in finding Jermaine.
This isn't a new problem, but we're trying to figure out new solutions.
In Louisville, Kentucky, Officer Brett Hankison getting ready to stand trial for the botched raid at Breonna Taylor's apartment. We get reaction from our law enforcement experts.
Is the alert able to talk to you?
No, free.
And in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, suspects fire 50 times at a victim and miss 50 times. We break down the video during Crime Time. Buckle your seatbelts. This hour of closing arguments starts right now.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. And there's something in the air because it seems during this hour, things are starting to heat up in a lot of the cases and investigations that are going on in the stories and mysteries that we've been following. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about Kylan Schulte and Crystal Turner. They were newlyweds out in Utah, Moab, Utah, and they lived the van life. And this story we covered before Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito and told stories about their van life. This was the first time I ever heard that term, the van life. And, you know, they worked, but when it was time to go home, they would go home to a van and campsites. They weren't living a super traditional life. But tragically, in the beautiful, beautiful scenic Moab, Utah, they were both murdered. And the case has not been solved. Here's Lauren Steinbrecher from our affiliate KSTU with the background on the murder of this newlywed couple.
With positive vibes and nothing but joy in her smile, to Bridget Calvert, her niece Kylan Schulte was a ray of light.
Her having such a beautiful soul, to see it complemented with someone like Crystal, that they could really enjoy life and do it together.
Kylan and her wife, Crystal Turner, got married 4 months ago, loved living van life, and called the outdoors around Moab home. Many people knew the couple around town, which is why when the two were no-call, no-shows to work, it was clear something was wrong. The family, all out of state, say police searched, but it wasn't until an acquaintance drove out to the South Mesa area in the LaSalle Mountains that they discovered the horrifying news.
She was on the phone with my brother when she pulled up to the car. She looks at the site and sees a body and tells my brother that he sent a text that said it's Kylan and Crystal.
The Grand County Sheriff's Office confirmed the two women were shot and killed, they believe, by someone else.
The evidence that we've gathered at this time, that's what it's led us to believe was an isolated incident.
That's all they can say for now. Bridget explained how friends told them the couple mentioned a man creeping them out near their campsite.
Saturday that they met up with, they said they were going to go move. They were going to pack up and move their campsite. That it was like he was still creeping them out.
The family is hoping someone can help them find answers.
What is very uncomforting is that there 100% is a murderer on the loose.
A murderer who took 2 lives away, but the family says will never put out the light, the love of Kylan and Crystal.
We're going to let their love light shine, that they had the most beautiful love, and that light is not stopping.
All right, folks, it's still unsolved. I'm putting the phone number up, Grand County Sheriff's Office, if you were in or around Moab, Utah, or maybe you heard something from a friend who was there, or a friend of a, doesn't matter. Here's the number, 435-259-8115, 435-259-8115. Now, you heard all this talk about a creepy guy, the creepy guy. Well, an affidavit for one of the search warrants that was executed in this case has been released, and there's some information on here. Extremely interesting, suspicious, makes you really think, you know, is this the creepy guy? Let me read part of that affidavit for you. Again, this is an affidavit for a search warrant just released. On the night of 8/17/21, Deputy Palmer made a traffic stop on a Subaru Outback driven by the subject. The subject was so unnerving that the veteran law enforcement officer decided not to write the speeding ticket as he did not want to take his eyes off of the subject. Wow. The deputy stated that the subject acted oddly for being pulled over for speeding, almost a combination of euphoria and that he had been caught doing something wrong. We were later told that the subject had been seen around town and that he routinely sleeps in his vehicle. One party stated that she had to make the subject leave her place of business as he makes unwanted advances towards women and makes them feel uneasy. Kind of creepy, right? The subject was asked if he knew Kylan, and he said he had seen her in the Moonflower Market regularly, where he was currently working but had never worked with her. Unbelievable company. The Moonflower Market, folks, that's where Kylan worked. That's where Brian Laundrie was seen slapping Gabby Petito, and now we've got the subject of this search warrant was working there as well. All right, what does this all mean? Let's bring in tonight's guests. Joining me in Salt Lake City, Utah, retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King. Also in Salt Lake City, I guess they call it SLC, right, if you're in, right, Utah. Private investigator Jason Jensen is with us. He's also working this case. And joining us by phone, of course, also in Salt Lake City, Utah, ABC4 reporter Marcos Ortiz is with us. Great to have everyone here from Salt Lake City. I've been there many times, I think about 8 times, but many years ago. I'm just going to start with Marcos, with ABC4. Marcos, thanks so much for joining us tonight. What are you hearing? What's the latest from investigators in terms of trying to find out who murdered this newlywed couple?
Well, it's hard to say what the investigators are thinking because they're still keeping this close to the vest. They're not talking publicly. I put in several calls today with the Grand County Sheriff's Department. No one has returned the call. And that's been their MO from the outset. They just will not release anything public. So we don't know what they're thinking or what's happening internally. But in talking with the cousin, Diane Brooke, she is the cousin of Crystal Turner. She's very pleased to have this information. It confirms her thoughts from the past, and that is that they are working this case. They're continuing to work this case, and she said that she'll wait. She'll wait a year. She'll wait 2 years. There's no hurry. What she wants is justice, and what she wants is to make sure that they get the right person for this crime.
Jason Jensen, private investigator, working this case. I'm reading this. The only thing that strikes me about it is if they work together, then it would seem that if there was a creepy guy hanging around, maybe they would have known who the creepy guy was if it's the subject of this search warrant. Tell me what you can tell me and what you know tonight, Jason.
Right. It's interesting that this guy picked up the job after Kylan is deceased, but was a regular there at the marketplace, because if you read through the affidavit for the warrant, he started on the 16th. Well, we know that this is the time frame that Kylan was missing. So they eventually figure out that she was likely murdered on the 14th, but they don't find her body till the 18th. So the timing of this is really weird, but given the fact that this is a warrant that was executed around the time that her body was found, we're talking 5 months ago. So the question begs now whether or not this is still a person of interest for them, because you would think that once the warrant was executed, they would have found the fruits of the crime, because they're asking in the warrant for to seek gun, ammo, gloves, and any evidence. One of the things that they mentioned is a jacket that they had interest in because there was a blood stain on it. What is the result of all that? Did this eliminate him as a suspect, or is he still somewhere on the radar?
Mike King, from this part of the search warrant, I'm going to read a little bit more of it in just a bit, but the thing that struck me is, and I always think of, you know, your podcast, Profiling Evil. This is evil that would take the lives of these two women. This veteran law enforcement officer is making a traffic stop and is so unnerved, doesn't want to leave to write the speeding ticket. I mean, that tells me volumes about how creepy this guy was.
And I think if you talk to any police officer, they've all probably experienced a similar dynamic where they just have shivers running up and down their spine saying something's not right and I need to keep my eyes on this individual. I had flashbacks as you were reading through that, Vinnie, of interviewing a couple of serial killers in particular who would get euphoric, and you use the word, and they use the word in the affidavit, euphoric feeling. They would get euphoric as they were kind of visualizing and reliving the experience of committing a homicide. Now, this is a couple of days after, if Jason's got the times dialed in right, and he's been, you know, right on the ground there working with the family and with law enforcement. But that is a really peculiar term, and it's something that I've witnessed a number of times where I've seen them, especially if you get a predator who's reliving the experience and talking through the experience. Now, on the flip side, it could be a red herring. I mean, I've been pulled over. I've never been euphoric about it, but my pulse has been running, and I've been dealing with law enforcement my entire life. So it's hard to take that and go too far with it. It's going to be really interesting to see what additional information comes out. And I got to hand it to Sheriff White and his team down there. I worked homicides when I was running cold cases for the Attorney General. I worked homicides with Sheriff White on a number of occasions, and I know that he's very good at what he does. But putting a case like this together really takes a long time, as you well know, Vinnie, and we all have to be just a little bit patient when we don't want to be, in hopes that they put all the puzzle pieces together so that it's a case that really sticks and they're able to get a conviction when the day comes.
All right, Mike King, I heard you say you want to hear some more. Let me get to more of this affidavit.
Good, let's do it.
Because there is more, folks. Wait till you hear this. Okay. The subject was asked if he knew his whereabouts for Friday night, Saturday night, or Sunday night. He could not give any times and stated he would travel to a spot that he often slept at as it was away from people. That's creepy. Described the location that he would normally sleep at as 100 to 300 yards up the loop road from the Moab overlook on a dirt road, and that he had left a blanket there. He had no one to corroborate his story or his location. Law enforcement located 2 blankets and a jacket, and they observed what they believed to be blood on the jacket, just as Jason Jensen told us. This location would cause Kylan and Crystal to pass it on their way to their campsite. They've got to go past this location. This location is 8.8 miles via the road from the scene where Kylan and Crystal were found, but is less than 4 miles if a straight path is taken. Marcos Ortiz, ABC4 reporter in Salt Lake City, Utah. I know you've read through this affidavit. What are some of the questions that you have tonight after reading through this?
Well, I agree with you. There's a lot of things when I read through this. It just struck me every time I read one sentence and then another. It was like creepy. This is not normal. And one thing also I might point out that at the bottom of the search warrant, I don't know if you saw this at all, but you know, when they went in to, they wanted to search his car, they were hoping to find a lot of different pieces of evidence that would connect him to the murder, firearms, ammunition, gloves, things of this nature. But when you read the return search warrant, these are the items that, and Mike, you can verify this, the return search warrant is what they actually found. And it wasn't much that they found. 2 cloth hats, 1 long sleeve shirt. So maybe that's the reason why this has taken a little bit longer than, you know, people would hope so.
Jason Jensen, remind us a little bit about the scene where Kylan and Crystal were murdered and how they were murdered.
Sure. This was a dispersed open area campsite where you don't have to pay a fee there, and it's not marked with concrete or anything like that. It's basically the wilderness, and while there's a couple of sets of groves of trees there, there's a couple of fire pits there where oftentimes people set up camp there for either the elk season, or they also call it bear camp for when it's not elk season. And it's like 100 feet to 150 feet off of the main road, the LaSalle Loop Road, where you can see a vehicle there from the main road. But so if you were driving by, if you knew that that's their car, you would know that where they were camping. But it's very serene, it's very quiet, it's off the beaten path where you don't have to worry about all the Moab visitors coming there for the arches or anything like that, because it's the opposite end of Moab, away from all the national parks.
Mike King, what Jason is telling me, it sounds like it's someone who's a little bit more familiar with the area. Not necessarily one of these drifters that's just flowing through if you're off the beaten path a little bit there.
It really makes you start to wonder if they were targeted and this was fantasized and thought out, or if it was an opportunistic kind of a killing where someone just happened to be at the right spot at the wrong time for this couple. And that's what's really challenging in these kinds of cases. But man, doesn't this make you want to know if they collected that jacket and tested the DNA in that blood and the DNA on the jacket to kind of put 2 and 2 together? I hope that shoe will drop soon too.
Absolutely. Marcos Ortiz from ABC4 out in Salt Lake City. Let me ask you about the community reaction to all of this. If there was a murder like this in my community, and obviously it's different than Moab. Moab is much more beautiful and spread out and is what it is. But how about the community there? Is there any fear that there is some sort of a homicidal maniac out there who hasn't been caught?
I don't sense that they have that fear. But I'll tell you what, they're very interested. This is a small town in southeast Utah. And unlike Salt Lake City, when there's a homicide here, it's a major city. It's the biggest city in Utah. And it just is kind of like you don't have that kind of reaction that you have in a small community. In this town of Moab, what I've been finding out is that people are very interested in this case. I mean, you put something on social media, even a story of this, and you get so much reaction, so many comments from people. I've just never had that kind of reaction from a community. But in leading to some of these threads, I don't sense that they are afraid, that they're fearing that this person is going to strike again. It's almost got to believe that this was a one-time event that happened. And I might want to add something too, that in terms of his campsite. You kind of wonder how long had he been at that campsite, because as you recall from one of the earlier exchanges, I think it was either Kylan or Crystal had said that this man was going to go get some clothes and food and be right back. Well, you read the warrant. Where he was at was only 4 miles away if you took a straight shot, or 8 miles by the road. So that kind of falls in place with what we've been hearing lately.
Absolutely. Jason Jensen, I want to get back to that Moonflower Market. Is this the only place in town? Because every story, every person connected, there's always this thread that goes through the Moonflower Market. What is this place, and is it like the only place in town?
No. When it comes to Moonflower, it's more of an organic and like more similar to like a Whole Foods market. There's other markets there. There's a city market, and there's all the convenience stores, but it's a very small town, so they really consider themselves blessed that they would have like a organic food market. But it is that kind of a community, though. They're more organic. They're more into being healthy eaters rather than, fast food. That there is a McDonald's, but that's about it.
Right in line, though, with the life that Kylan was living, to work there and then to live this van life and enjoy the outdoors. All right, Mike King, Jason Jensen staying with us. Marcos Ortiz from ABC4 in Salt Lake City, Utah. Great to have you on the show tonight. You do amazing work, and we hope to have you on again.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks. When we come back, we're going to open up tonight's unsolved case file. Jermaine Charlo, 23 years old, mother of 2, goes missing out of Missoula. Where is she? We're going to take a closer look tonight.
Behind the news.
It's time to open up tonight's Unsolved Case file. This is where, again, we're asking for your help. If you have any information, please, tonight, pick up the phone, make the call, make a difference, do the right thing. Tonight's story is about a 23-year-old mother of two, and the question tonight is, where is Jermaine Charlo?
It's been 3 years since Jermaine Charlo, a 23-year-old mother of two, rounded a corner outside the Badlander bar in Missoula, Montana, and vanished. Video surveillance from outside the bar on June 15th of 2018 shows the last time she was seen alive. Her disappearance sparked protests across the state, and in 2020, public outcry about Charlo's case pushed local tribe leaders to launch a new pilot program for dealing with the nationwide crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous people.
It goes back several generations, so this isn't a new problem, but we're trying to figure out new solutions.
Even with all the attention from the public, her case remains unsolved. Guy Baker is the lead detective on the case.
It's not a closed case. It's not a cold case. It's still very active.
Baker is the second detective to be assigned to the case. He took over the investigation 11 days after Charlo went missing.
I think you always look to the past to see if you can do better. You try to do the best job you can under the circumstances, but, looking back, some things could have been done a little differently that I think would have been beneficial, but nothing was done wrong or was detrimental, I should say, to the investigation.
Charlo's ex-boyfriend, Michael DeFrance, pleaded guilty to assaulting Jermaine in 2013, 5 years before her disappearance. But in new court documents, prosecutors allege that in June and October of 2018, DeFrance violated the terms of that conviction by knowingly possessing firearms and ammunition. DeFrance entered a not guilty plea to the new charges during his appearance in U.S. District Court. Jermaine Charlo's relatives were in attendance.
I knew he was in trouble for having a partner family member assault against Jermaine multiple times, and then he's posting on Facebook pictures of himself holding firearms. So I was really hoping that, that would be addressed, and I'm happy that it was finally addressed and that he is held responsible for his actions.
Authorities have not released any information connecting DeFrance to Charlo's disappearance.
I just hope that this is a stepping stone in the right direction to where we can actually find Jermaine and bring peace to our family.
Okay, folks, here's the number, 406-552-6300. You can call the Missoula County Police Department at that number, or the Flathead Tribal Police, 406-675-4700. If you have information, there may just be a small piece of information that they need to make the difference here. Still with me tonight, retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King, and private investigator Jason Jensen. Mike, this DeFrance guy, history of assaulting her, firearms, in trouble. Obviously, that's the first place that investigators are looking and have been looking, but it doesn't seem that they have enough yet to bring any charges here.
You hope in these kinds of cases that the pressure continues to mount on the individual or individuals who are responsible for these kinds of heinous acts. The feds turned up the heat. They took him back and leveled the charges and the probation violations against him. Now the question is, it's been a couple of months since we last visited this case. Has that made a difference? Is the pressure continuing to mount if, in fact, he's responsible? Well, all we can say is that we know that there was past destructive behavior in the relationship, and that certainly doesn't mean he's responsible, but you have to continue to look at that and look at the effort that he's put in to finding her. And I guess that's the thing that continues to trouble me in these cases, Vinnie, as we go over cases like this over and over again, is the person closest to him. You see these polar opposites of digging all in and nothing gets in the way of looking for him. And then you see others who kind of just wash their hands and move on with life and don't look back. And that's really frightening, and it's really frustrating for all of us. It's also a time for the law enforcement folks to maybe re-examine all of the information and see if there are some things that maybe they could release to the public, because there is a huge machine of public out there that would love to share information if they only knew what was being asked for.
Absolutely. Jason Jensen, still don't know where she is. And in that part of the country, it can be very difficult to find someone who's missing, and perhaps someone who's been murdered. It is just almost impossible if you don't have some lead directing you somewhere.
Oh, exactly. And you know, I understand why there's such focus on DeFrance, but the last thing that we do know for a fact is that she left the Badlander bar about midnight through the alleyway. I would really want to know who was in attendance at the bar that night, who she interacted with, because we do know that 58% of the time it's a family member or something responsible for a disappearance or a murder, but that's not always the case. That leaves open the other remaining portion that somebody could have just met her. It could be a stranger abduction and then, you know, a disappearance.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, Mike, if there's surveillance video from inside that bar or the outside. There might be some security footage just to know who was there.
Exactly. And I think Jason's hitting something really important, is that you can't focus just on those closest. You have to consider those other opportunistic kinds of crimes. And do they have people in the bar that are saying, hey, I saw this particular person watching her or following her, or when she got up and left, this other individual got up and left. Those are the kinds of things that are going to really break this case, is if somebody will just say, you know what, it's been 3 years. I got to step up and share what I saw.
All right, folks, we've got the phone number up. If you have any information, you know someone that was at the bar that night, or maybe you were there, it's time to make the call and to see if they can get closer to finding Jermaine and holding someone responsible. Mike King and Jason Jensen working overtime for us tonight. We appreciate it. Thanks so much, and we'll see you again really, really soon.
Thanks,
and
Vinnie.
someday I'll make my way out to SLC, and we'll go get some organic food in Moab or something. Okay? Thanks so much, guys.
Great.
Still ahead.
In Louisville, Kentucky, Officer Brett Hankison getting ready to stand trial for the botched raid at Breonna Taylor's apartment. We get reaction from our law enforcement experts.
Is the alert able to talk to you? No,
And in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, suspects fire 50 times at a victim and miss 50 times. We'll break down the video during Crime Time.
What are legal
This is no longer the search for missing children. This is the search for killers.
This stretches just so beyond what anyone could imagine.
Breaking news in the case against Doomsday Prophet Chad Daybell.
Prosecutors say they will seek the death penalty against him.
Investigators have recovered human remains at Chad Daybell's residence.
There's no way, Logan. I should never come up with this.
Lori was his follower. Chad Daybell's the prophet.
Chad had a vision, plagues, and foreign troops coming to the soil.
Will his wife, Lori Daybell, turn on him?
It's just so hard to know where the truth ends.
All eyes on this Idaho trial.
Big ruling by the judge. The venue changed.
The further away you can get from the scene of the alleged incident, the better off you are.
Think about all the people that had to die and disappear. It's the Doomsday Prophet Chad Daybell on trial. It is crime time here on Closing Arguments. Let's bring in tonight's guests. Joining me, Major with the Cobb County Sheriff's Office Community Engagement, Stephen Gaynor is with us. Stephen served 28 years with the Cobb County Police Department, working in the robbery, homicide, special victims, criminal investigations, and training units. Also with us tonight, Assistant Chief Jailer, former Chief of the Major Crime Section, Lieutenant Colonel Adam Lee III. Adam served as a police officer for 30 years. He oversaw homicide cases, robberies, special victims units, and a gun assault team. Great to have you both here tonight, guys. We're getting ready to cover another trial here on Court TV for one of the officers involved in the botch raid in Kentucky of Breonna Taylor's apartment. I got a couple things I got to ask you about that, but let's take a look at some background on the case with Joy Lim Nakrin, Court TV crime and justice reporter.
It was a tragedy that became a flashpoint in the Black Lives Matter movement. In March of 2020, police officers in Louisville, Kentucky shot and killed Breonna Taylor in a botched raid on her home. Her death sparked outrage and protests. After a 6-month investigation led by Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, only one officer will face criminal charges connected to the shooting.
The grand jury voted to return an indictment against Detective Hankinson.
Brett Hankison faces 3 counts of wanton endangerment, but not for endangering Taylor. Instead, the charges stem from shots he fired through covered glass that penetrated into a unit next door with 3 people inside. Louisville Metro Police were working on a narcotics investigation and served a no-knock search warrant on Taylor's apartment when it happened.
Officers encountered rifle fire. Officer down.
Taylor and her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, were awakened by pounding at the door. Walker grabbed his weapon, thinking someone was breaking in. He fired his gun once, striking Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly in the leg.
EMS is around the corner radio. We need EMS here now.
Officers unleashed a hail of bullets, hitting Taylor multiple times.
911 operator, where's your emergency?
I don't know what's happening. Somebody kicked in the door and shot my girlfriend.
Can you check and see where she's been shot at?
I can't get on the stomach.
Okay. Is she alert and able to talk to you?
No, free.
This video, obtained by Court TV, captured an emotional Kenneth Walker just moments after his girlfriend was shot dead by police. The city of Louisville paid out a historic $12 million settlement to Taylor's estate.
As I understand, it's the largest amount ever paid out for a black woman in a wrongful death killed by a police in America.
But the Taylor family says there is still a long fight ahead in their quest for justice.
It's time to move forward with the criminal charges because she deserves that and much more. Her beautiful spirit and personality is working through all of us on the ground. So please continue to say her name, Breonna Taylor.
Former Detective Hankison, he is free on bond and has pleaded not guilty to the charges.
Okay, Major Stephen Gaynor with us, Lieutenant Colonel Adam Lee with us. Before we get to Brett Hankinson and the charges against him, let's talk about the raid itself, the way it went down, and your thoughts about whether what was done was truly botched. It was unavoidable. It was very avoidable. I'll begin with you, Major Stephen Gaynor.
Well, Vinny, this is a tragedy any way you look at it. No-knock warrants, whether arrest or search warrants, are valuable to law enforcement, but certain steps need to be taken to make sure they're executed properly and that you go to the right apartment or the house and you take the proper steps. And I don't know that they did all those. We'd have to look at all the facts and see that that information was gathered. But one of the problems, I think, in this case is they didn't do proper surveillance. I believe this was a new boyfriend, and the one they were actually looking for had departed the scene sometime earlier. And that calls for proper surveillance to make sure you got the right person in the location when you hit it.
Lieutenant Colonel, your thoughts about the actual execution of this warrant and the shootout that ensued?
Well, Vinny, it's a very good example of the risk not being worth the reward. These types of warrants were meant to give officers an element of surprise to prevent the destruction of evidence, to prevent someone from escaping, or to prevent a suspect from arming himself. And so oftentimes it ends in tragic consequences like it did that evening. So I have to question, just like Stephen said, what was your surveillance prior to that situation? As I recall, the person that they were actually looking for was possibly already incarcerated in a jail somewhere. So someone definitely didn't do their homework.
Now, let's get to the trial that's coming up, Brett Hankison. Now, the individuals there was one officer who was shot. He's not charged with anything. Another officer who we believe shot and killed Breonna Taylor, not charged with anything. The boyfriend who was with Breonna Taylor in the apartment who shot the officer, not charged with anything. The only one who's charged is Brett Hankison, and he fired his weapon, and 3 of his shots, I believe, went from Breonna's apartment, went through the wall into another adjacent apartment, and that's part of the charges against him for the reckless behavior that night. Your thoughts, Stephen Gaynor, I'll begin with you. Your thoughts about that case coming up and those charges against Hankinson.
Well, Vinny, we talk about it all the time. Officers own every round they fire out of their gun. I believe in this case, he fired blindly through the blinds into the room, missed any of the people that were shooting, and that's why he's charged in this case. You have to identify the target you're shooting at and that there is a threat there and you are in jeopardy or somebody is in jeopardy of serious bodily harm or injury. And you have to have those. You have to be clear on what you're shooting at. It's just like going hunting. You just don't fire into the brush because you think it might be a deer. You have to identify your target.
Lieutenant Colonel.
You know, Stephen and I were both taught something in the academy, Vinny, and it was called firearms discipline. Every officer is taught to make sure that he has a clear target, to ensure that no one else is in danger of being struck by a round that's going to be coming out of his weapon. And apparently this officer didn't listen to that part of the lesson plan.
Let me ask you this, from your experience and years on the job, and Major, I'll begin with you. A case like this, now, how common is it for an officer to be charged for this type of behavior? Now, this case has a spotlight on it because of what happened to Breonna, but from your experience, how common are charges like this?
Well, nowadays, they're very common. You have to be more responsible. You can't get away with the things when I started 30 years ago. Everybody just let things go. This is a tragic situation. You're going to see the officers that actually did the shooting not once. They fired upon an individual who fired upon them. So in this case, they're charging an individual that had nothing to do with the actual fatality of that young lady.
All right. We're going to have more Crime Time straight ahead. Major Stephen Gaynor, Lieutenant Colonel Adam Lee III with us. We've got much more straight ahead.
Derek Chauvin,
Welcome back to our Crime Time segment. Still with us, Major Stephen Gaynor and Lieutenant Colonel Adam Lee III. Next video we have comes to us from Philadelphia, from the Philadelphia PD. And we've got suspects firing more than 50 rounds at a man in a car and missing more than 50 times while firing at that man in the car. Let's take a look. Okay, what's the next step in the investigation? Lieutenant Colonel Adam Lee, and your thoughts also about the 0 for 50 and the shooting there.
Who says miracles don't exist? I would argue that they do. I mean, if you just talk to that guy, I'm sure he believes in miracles. I mean, not being hit after being shot at 50 times is incredible. But there's a plethora of evidence left on the scene. You can see the shell casings coming out of the weapons in the parking lot there. So when the police get there, they'll be collecting those shell casings. They'll be placing them in the NIBIN system, which is the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. It's a database where it's basically the fingerprints for guns. And they left a lot of fingerprints on the scene, I'm sure, and that's what they'll be doing next.
Major Stephen Gaynor, your thoughts about what we saw there, the 0 for 50 and the investigation?
Man, that's like the movies, gangster-style shooting. But there will be DNA. There'll be possibly DNA on the casings that they could collect. There might be some good video from other cameras. I know I say this all the time, but it appears to be gang activity. I'd be interested in the second party that got shot at. Is there a gang affiliation here, rival gangs? That's what I'm looking at first. It looks like a gang activity. That's probably a stolen car. I'm just guessing. But those are some of the things I'm seeing in this particular video.
You know, Lieutenant Colonel, should we be shocked here that it looks like all this is happening right out in the open? There's not necessarily any concern about being caught, that this is what you're going to do out in the open. It's not in some back alley somewhere out of sight. There's lights, there's cameras, and there's other people all around.
You know, Vinnie, over the years, I've actually seen a proliferation of gang activity and the brazen boldness of these gang members. They don't care. I mean, it could be broad daylight and they would still do the same thing. So it's getting to the point now where I think they're becoming more and more reckless.
And final question for both of you. Looking great tonight, guys. Very sharp. Is there some event that I was not invited to?
You can come out and hang out for a little while. I got until midnight.
Steve's having a party at the precinct.
There you go. Well, really appreciate your time, both of you, and your insight. Your experience is incredible. We'll see you again really soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, when we come back, we're going to take you back inside the courtroom. Big day in the popcorn movie murder trial. A lot of important testimony for the defense. Are they raising a reasonable doubt? We'll take a look.
If you're over 50